Shalom, shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel. Once again, it's another edition of the Daily Edification, Exhortation, coming to you through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. All praises and glories definitely due, especially in these times. And speaking of these times, in this video we'll delve a little into prophecy concerning the so-called Chinese, the Moabites. That's what they're known as in the Bible, the Moabites. And it makes sense that they would be Moab and the so-called Japanese would be Ammon or the Ammonites, because of the two, the Moabites is greater. Okay? And you have a lot of people in America that think, people that think they're up on geopolitics. They think that, but they may be up on geopolitics, but they're not up on prophecies of the Holy Scriptures. They're not up on what the Holy Scriptures have to say concerning this very situation. They think that China is the next to take over and rule. Like, case in point, this guy sitting here, Max Kaiser, that's the guy you see sitting here. And really what inspired me to do this video was a video that Elder Apostle did at 3:32 in the morning, mind you, which shows you that the men had GMS. Well, the term GMS goes back to great millstone, and that's what a great millstone does. It's always working. It's always grinding, and grinding is a metaphor for work. Okay, it's a metaphor for work. So we're always working, man. We're always grinding out these videos. Of all the Israelite groups, the Israelite group that puts out the most videos is Great Millstone. That's an undisputed fact. Okay, we're the Israelite group that put out the most videos, and over here at GMS we stress upon edification. Now, not everybody in GMS edifies when they do their videos. We would like it to be that way, but nevertheless, you got some guys out there that you watch their video and you're like, what is this all about? But for the majority of us here at Great Millstone, when we do our videos, we do it with edification in mind. Okay? Alright, so that being said, let me get back to Elder Apostle video. So it inspired me to do this video, kept back by fraud. Now, as you can see the caption here, China to overtake the U.S. sooner than expected. That's according to Max Kaiser. And really that's a vain statement pursuant to Bible prophecy. It brings to mind the book of Psalms, the 2nd chapter. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? Now the heathen and the people is talking about these other nations that think they're the next to rule. Okay, they see Esau's power is waning, right? So they think they're next up to bat. But what they don't realize is Yahweh Shai, a so-called black man, is coming from a whole nother dimension, cracking those skies, as it were, to take over the planet Earth and set up his kingdom on the planet Earth. That's what's going to happen. And that's that's the main point of this video, why I'm even doing this video. Okay? So without further ado, let me just play a little bit of Elder Apostle video and bring out the scriptures concerning what the Lord has said about Moab, which is the so-called Chinese, and their pride, and how their pride is going to be destroyed, and how all the other nations, including Moab, and mainly Esau, right, their power is going to be reduced by the power of Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, in particular Yahweh Shai, because he's coming back to set up his kingdom on the planet Earth. And we as Israelites, beginning with the hopeful elect, we're going to rule with Yahweh Shai. As it is written, we're joint heirs with Yahweh Shai. So we're going to rule with him. Yahweh Shai being our head, our leader, and also King David. Because Yahweh Shai is going to set up King David over his kingdom. Okay? Alright, so let's get into it. Alright?
He goes back as a young
Apostle is talking about Max Kaiser.
I don't know if he was appropriate.
The guy sitting there, Max Kaiser.
The whole Wall Street stocks and bonds thing. Anyway, it says Max and Stacy look at a new report suggesting that China will
So now you heard that, right? So according to Max Kaiser and some other individual pastor I mentioned, they believe that China is going to overtake America. China is going to rule. Years ago, maybe a couple of years ago, I know I saw the commercial. There used to be a commercial on TV where the so-called Chinese, I don't know if I saw it on TV or on YouTube. Might have been YouTube. No, I don't remember. But anyway, the commercial was the so-called Chinese making fun of the so-called white people, and in the commercial was saying they're the next to rule. What the so-called white people don't know is they're the next to rule. That was the nature of the commercial. And let's not forget Timothy Geithner. Google him. He went over to China begging for their help or something like that, and he got laughed to scorn by the so-called Chinese. That you should be able to find that article of if you type in Timothy Geithner in China, or Timothy Geithner gets laughed at in China, something like that. You should arrive at that article. So it's unanimous. Moab is proud, and they think they're the next to rule, and the scripture's got something to say about that. Okay, let's go to the book of let's go to the book of 2nd Esdras, the 15th chapter. Now this is all part of prophecy. You know, us here at Great Millstone, we're the prophecy camp, right? 2nd Esdras 15:1, let's start there. It says, "Behold, speak thou in the ears of my people the words of prophecy." So that's really what we're supposed to be doing as prophets. We're supposed to be speaking the words of prophecy, right? Which the word prophecy means to say before. "Which I will put in thy mouth, saith the Lord." So it's really the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, putting these words in our mouth, telling us what to say and what not to say, and cause them to be written in paper, for they are faithful and true. That paper obviously is the Bible. And faithful and true, right? Now we're going to jump down, because obviously I'm not going to read the whole chapter. We're just going to bounce around and get to the point. So this is all dealing with prophecy. All these verses here is dealing with prophecy. Now what about the prophecy of Moab? Well, let's see. Now even though you don't see the words Moab there, we know that's talking about the so-called Chinese, which are the Moabites according to the Bible. Okay, 2nd Esdras 15:46. "And thou Asia," now the so-called Chinese are also known as what? Asians, which I believe the word Asia means east. Now if I'm wrong or mistaken, please correct me on the comment board, the comment section. "And thou Asia, that art partaker of the hope of Babylon." Now, who's Babylon? America. America's Babylon. Okay, so the Chinese, the so-called Chinese, are in bed with the so-called Americans in dealing with finances. Okay, dealing with, basically dealing with finances, dealing with business. Okay, dealing with commerce, right? That's what it means by "thou art partaker of the hope of Babylon." What's the hope of Babylon? The hope of America, to build this American empire, right? And China's in bed with them. Okay, now I can go, I can get a little bit more intricate, but you get the general idea. When it comes down to business and commerce, China is part of the hope of Babylon. China is part of the hope of America, dealing with commerce and business. Okay, so much so that they think they're going to eclipse Babylon, which really represents America, which represents Esau, so-called white man. They think they're going to eclipse them in power. Hence the statement Max Kaiser made, right? Reading on, it says, "Thou art partaker of the hope of Babylon, and art the glory of her person." And that's one of the reasons why the Moabites are so proud, right? "Woe be," now woe means destruction. That's what woe means. "Woe be unto thee, thou wretch." So here the Heavenly Father, through the prophet Esdras, is calling the Moabites, dealing, of course, starting with their leadership, a wretch. Okay, woe be. So destruction is they're not gonna prosper to where they're gonna take over. No matter how much Max Kaiser makes that statement, it's not going to happen. Okay, woe be unto thee. The final woe is going to come through Yahweh Shai. We're gonna look at that in the book of Psalms, the 2nd chapter. Okay, woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her. Exactly. Now there was a time where China, you had the Forbidden Wall, and China was closed off, and you didn't see all the so-called modern day technology in China that you see today. Okay, case in point. One of the examples I use is the restaurant Hooters. Now, do you know that they actually opened up a Hooters restaurant in China? Now, in the past, that would have been unheard of. Behind that so-called Forbidden Wall, that would have been unheard of. But today, the so-called Chinese are very much just like the so-called Americans. As a matter of fact, the so-called Chinese woman, she's in heaven when she gets herself a so-called white boy. Okay, the most desired man among the so-called Chinese women is a so-called white man. That's a fact. Okay, so that all ties into what I'm reading here. Woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her. So the so-called Chinese have become just like the so-called white man, the modern-day Babylonians. Okay, and has decked thy daughters in whoredom. And I gave you an example of the Hooters restaurant. If you don't know what Hooters is about, type it in. It's a restaurant where women are solely hired based upon the size of their breasts, the contour and size of their breasts. Okay, hence the term Hooters. That's a slang term for the breasts. You know, titties, if you will. All right, milk jugs. All right. Take it from me, I'm a breast man, so you know. Anyway, that's another topic. And has decked thy daughters in whoredom. So you understand that, right? That they might please and glory in thy lovers. And thy lovers is all the other nations, man. They're all in bed together. They're all striving for that so-called New World Order. Okay? Right? That's what it's all about. And technically, for Kaiser to make that statement is really disingenuous, because he knows about the top banking families. There's no way the Moabites, the tippy top of the Moabites, is going to eclipse the top banking families of Esau, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. No way. Okay? Because they got the main power. And Kaiser knows that. But once again, these guys are double agents, you know. Anyway, you're not going to get the 100% truth from them, but you are going to get 100% truth from us. All right? That they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee, just like the so-called Chinese woman. She looks at the so-called white man, and she's always desired to commit whoredom with the so-called white man. Absolutely, man. That's their number one man. Okay, now guess what? When the so-called white man goes down, his image goes down, and the so-called black man becomes the number one man on the planet Earth, which is destined to happen. Guess who the so-called Chinese women gonna lust after? You got it. Okay. Anyway, let's read on. Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works. And who's hated in all their works? The so-called white man, the modern-day Babylonians. The so-called Americans, if you will. Let's start with them. The most hated country on the planet Earth. Okay? Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works. And the so-called Chinese is following who? The so-called white people, the so-called white man. Okay? And inventions. Therefore saith the Most High. So the Most High is saying this. I will send plagues upon thee. So we're in that time where get ready to see the so-called Chinese being plagued. Okay? All right, the Moabites. I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death. And supposedly that C-19 started in Wuhan, China. Okay, so there's going to be actual plagues starting in that part of the world. Okay, because the prophecy has to